everyone, and welcome to the 2016 Spring Quarter Public Policy Practicum presentation. Today we'll be exploring the last frontier, in other words, the best management practices for turf removal and landscape programs. We are very excited to share with you the work that we've been doing throughout the quarter. So before we get started, let's meet the team.
I'm Scott. My concentration is international and national security policy.
I'm Foluke. I am double majoring in African and African American studies, and my public policy concentration is crime, discrimination, and poverty.
And I'm Isaac, and my concentration is also crime, discrimination, and poverty.
And I'm Connor, and I'm also international and national security policy.
I'm Kaitlyn, and my concentration is law and the legal system. So as I mentioned, we'll be discussing turf conversion. And given that California has been facing a drought over the last few years, I'm sure everyone in this room can understand why this conversation is not only pertinent, but very timely. The drought has created many challenges for California with respect to water supply and water consumption, and California has been forced to explore a range of conservation measures, some of which have reached saturation, while others are still uncommon. For example, low-flush toilets and high-efficiency washing machines have become staples in our daily lives, while measures aimed at curbing outdoor water use, such as alternative landscaping, which we'll talk about today, still have a lot of opportunity for growth. So this quarter, we've been working with the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency in order to evaluate its turf removal program, the Lawn Beyond program. To guide our analysis, we had 4 major research questions, and those are: 1, how have BOSCA agency turf conversion programs impacted water use trends? 2, what elements of a turf conversion program contribute to its effectiveness? 3, how do demographic factors impact participation in turf conversion programs? And lastly, what are the best management practices for BOSCA's Lawn Beyond program in the future? So to guide our presentation, we created a roadmap for you. We'll first start by giving you background information, and then we'll share with you our methodology and results. We'll then discuss limitations for our analysis, and we'll end with the recommendations we plan to share with BOSCA tomorrow.
We're going to begin with some background about our client. BOSCA is a special water agency created in 2003, which works in parallel with 26 partner agencies. That's 16 city agencies, 8 water districts, and 2 private water suppliers. The service area includes 1.7 million people across Alameda County, Santa Clara County, and San Mateo County. For our purposes, we're going to focus on the conservation aspect of BOSCA, but BOSCA also helps with water supply side of things. So BOSCA managed to meet the 25% mandate quota, which was set up in May 2015, asking for a 25% across-the-board reduction in water use. BOSCA, we can say, reduced it by 27% compared to the same months in 2013. To conduct our analysis, we relied on both qualitative and quantitative data. On the quantitative side, we used historical Lawn Beyond data that was provided to us by BOSCA. Lawn Beyond is the turf conversion program run by BOSCA, just in case you're wondering. So BOSCA managed to provide us with just the participation data for these programs, which focuses on how many people participated and from which organization they are from, or which agency they're part of. Also, we had individual agency data, which is drawn from 5 agencies. These were also provided to us by BOSCA. So this data focuses on participation, but also water consumption, or water use, which is from individual statements across a 5-year span. We also use American Community Survey data. This is essentially census data, which is taken every year, and we use this for our GIS mapping. On the quantitative side, we did a comprehensive literature review of reports and studies from programs not only in the BOSCA region, but also in Southern California and Nevada. We did program evaluations as well, which focused on programs in the BOSCA area which are not part of Lawn Beyond, but also programs in Southern California. And we also conducted a series of interviews with partner organizations in the BOSCA region.
And then to better understand the demographic composition of the BOSCA region, We use geographic information systems using Stanford's geospatial labs. And we used as Scott mentioned, the American Community Survey from 2014. And we did it in block groups, which is the smallest geographic unit that is surveyed by the census. And so as we can see, we're going to start with median household income. The darker spots are going to be higher incomes, the more tan spots are going to be lower incomes. And as we can see, there's a great disparity and diversity within the Bosca region. Starting in the region that we probably know best, the Redwood City, Menlo Park, Atherton, East Palo Alto, down into Stanford, Mountain View, and Sunnyvale, we can see there's a big disparity in income. And then next we're going to talk about the household density in the region. The cooler, bluer spots are going to be the more dense, the more red, warm spots are going to be less dense. Starting up north in San Francisco, we can see that there are a little bit of a mixed bag. There are some denser areas as well as some areas that are more spread out. On the east end in Hayward and Alameda County, they're more densely packed. And then going back to the area that we know best, Redwood City down into Sunnyvale, more spread out. There are a couple places where it is dense, but for the most part pretty spread out. Next we're going to get into some racial demographics, starting with the amount of Hispanic population in the area. Specifically, we want to focus on Redwood City on the west side and Hayward on the west side. We want to focus on these because we had individual data from both of these agencies to track their participation. Redwood City comprises of 38% of their population is Hispanic or Latino, and Hayward is 40%. And then bouncing off this, we can see again Redwood City, and then towards the eastern side of the Bosca region, this represents the number of households that only speak Spanish. So for adults over the age of 16, their household is comprised of adults that only speak Spanish. Moving on, we can see that on the eastern end in Hayward and Alameda County, there are also some highly populated areas for Asian-speaking languages. Now Foluke is going to talk about turf conversion programs.
Great. So we've been talking about turf conversion, but what exactly is turf conversion? So turf conversion is the process of replacing turf grass with native plants that demand less water in order to conserve water. And these programs offer customers a rebate for every square foot of turf that is removed and replaced. And so some common program requirements that are involved are usually pre and post inspection, during which home visits are made before and after the conversion to survey the property. Irrigation systems are updated and fixed, which usually means installing a drip system as opposed to a sprinkler system. And customers are asked to submit designs prior to conversion for approval. And then, once again, the replacing of turf grass with either native plants or climate-appropriate plants. So, Lawn Begon is the turf conversion program that is run by Bosca. And 10 member agencies participate in Lawn Begon, and their rebate amounts vary from about $1 to $4 per square foot. And this table, which unfortunately is not very visible, just lists the different water agencies along with their rebate amounts. And they have different customer types the program applies to. So one is residential single family, so households, residential multifamily, so apartment type living situations, and then commercial, industrial, institutional, in other words, businesses. And some agencies, not all Bosca agencies participate in Lawn Begon, some of them have their own turf conversion programs. And the reason for this is typically because they desire more flexibility. So we'll go into some more of those details in a minute.
So in our analysis, we focus entirely on customers who are single-family residential customers. And there are three main reasons why we decided to restrict our analysis in this way. First, as you'll notice from the pie chart, almost half of total customers are single-family residential. Second, of those who have participated in Bosca's Lawn Begon program historically, 72% of those customers are single-family residential, 3% are multifamily residential, and another 3% are commercial, industrial, institutional. There are 22% that are actually unspecified, and this is due to a gap in Bosca's data collection. So of the customers in our data set that are identified, over 90% are single-family residential. And then the last reason we wanted to focus on this customer class is specifically because Bosca wanted us to, hence our desire to prioritize them. We also decided to do qualitative analysis. As Foluke mentioned, there are other programs from BOSCA agencies. So some BOSCA agencies don't participate in Lawn Be Gone and they have their own programs. In order to evaluate this, we created our own qualitative chart of those programs. This is a consolidated version of our original chart. We've removed all of the Lawn Be Gone participating agencies, and we've just included agencies with their own programs, and we've consolidated agencies that offer the same program. You'll notice there's one agency that offers no program, but for the most part, most of the agencies have programs. There are 4 main highlights from that table, which I'll illuminate for you now. One is that Alameda County Water District uses BOSCA's WaterWise gardening tool. They also offer free water efficient landscaping classes and workshops. And this shows that BOSCA has tools in its toolbox that other agencies are leveraging, and that BOSCA can potentially modify those tools to make them more accessible. The California Water Service agencies, you have an online application, which requires online account registration. They also have online course guides, plant databases and guides, additional readings, and general information. And what they've taken advantage of is using the internet in order to advertise and make their program more accessible. And so we've learned that BOSCA is in the process of designing its own website, but this is something that we believe it needs to do in order to make its program accessible. And finally, Westboro County Water District did not have a program, but they do offer WaterWise landscaping classes and bay-friendly landscaping classes. And this is just to highlight the importance of residential education, which even if you don't have a program, there are opportunities to educate your residents in order to change social norms, which is ultimately what's most important.
So in this next part of the presentation, we're going to be talking about our methodology and how we went about measuring the effectiveness of turf removal programs or turf conversion programs. So in our analysis, we focused on 2 main things. The first being tracking water savings attributable to turf conversion programs, and the second being making observations about program participation and completion trends. So to do this, we used both quantitative and qualitative methods. And we looked at the Lawn Be Gone program specifically, but also other turf conversion programs that are run independently by BOSCA agencies that opted out of Lawn Be Gone. So on the quantitative side of things, for water consumption trends, we used the data that was provided to us by the 5 agencies that opted out of Lawn Be Gone, or by 5 agencies. Those agencies are Hayward, Redwood City, Estero Municipal Improvement District, Alameda County Water District, and Stanford. So we used that data to create graphs that visually show water consumption trends at an agency level before and after a turf conversion program. For application analysis, we used the more general historic Lawn Be Gone data, and what we did with that was we looked at all the applicants that are participating in Lawn Be Gone programs, and we tried to notice where how far they were getting into the process, and identified points at which we saw a significant dropout. The GIS mapping is basically the maps that Connor showed us before, the demographic maps of the regions that we were working with, and these really help to contextualize the populations that are in BOSCA's region. For the demographic participation trends, we basically use that same information that we got by using the GIS mapping, and we contrasted it with certain participation trends to see if we can notice some kind of relationship between participation and certain demographics. On the qualitative side of things, for our program evaluation research, this consisted of a literature review that mostly incorporated reports on past turf conversion programs statewide, and also incorporated the research that we did on BOSCA's 26 member agencies, especially the 5 that gave us the individual data set, program-specific data set. We also conducted interviews. We also conducted interviews with employees from BOSCA member agencies to get more anecdotal information about the challenges and successes of these programs. And lastly, we created a qualitative comparison chart, which is the one that Kaitlyn showed us, which highlights the differences in the individually run programs. So, through our analyses, we basically concluded that there are 2 main reasons why we should remain optimistic about turf conversion programs in the future. The first one is that in our research, we noticed significant increase in participation in recent years. And we think that this might be due to a heightened reception of the drought and the governor's mandate, the unofficial one in 2014 and the official one in 15. So we basically take this as a signal that this is a critical time where we could really be taking advantage of the changing social norms and people's increased positive perception of water conservation measures. And turf conversion programs are a very public and influential way to do this. Our second reason is that there are definitely observable water savings that we notice that are attributable to turf conversion programs. Although turf conversion programs realistically will never reach program saturation, so 100% program participation is unlikely, that's not necessarily what we're after. What we're after is more to be able to say that the people that are participating are actually saving water using these programs and that they're influencing their neighbors and their community to save more water as well. So now we're just going to talk a little bit about our results and findings. So I'll mention a couple takeaways that we have before we go more in depth with our results. So again, our first takeaway is the observable water savings that we saw across the 5 agencies that we looked in depth. And then another kind of takeaway that we saw was the relationships that we saw between participation and certain demographic populations. So for example, there was a positive correlation between the percentage of the white population in a certain region with participation rates. That goes as well for, there's a positive relationship between the level of education and participation. And then on the other side, there was a negative relationship between participation and percent of Hispanic and Asian population in a region. The last takeaway that I'm going to mention is that we noticed that pre- and post-inspection stages were quite challenging for participants as they were going through the process. And we kind of crafted some of our recommendations based on these takeaways.
So one key part of our finding are the participation trends that we observed. So when we tracked the number of conversions over time, we saw an upward trend in participation, as well as a noticeable spike between the years 2014 and 2015 in participation. This first graph shows Alameda County Water District and Redwood City, which are our high-yield agencies and cities, and that's because they have the most conversions going on. And what you'll notice is that from 2014 to 2015, their program participation roughly doubled. So turning to the next graph, which is of the lower yield cities, Stanford, EMIT, and Hayward, you'll notice they have a much smaller number of conversions. We still see this upward trend in participation, particularly from 2014 to 2015, participation roughly tripled. And so what we conclude from this is we believe the spike in participation at this moment of 2015 has a lot to do with Governor Brown's mandate concerning the drought. And we believe that people are becoming more aware of water conservation and its importance. And so this is really critical because it implies that we're in a key moment for turf conversion and that there's a readiness for these programs. And agencies like BOSCA need to be ready for that in order to prepare for how to best capitalize on this and ultimately best maximize water savings. So in addition to program participation, it's also important to consider program completion. And so on the left-hand side, we have a pie chart that shows long begone applicants. And you'll notice that 44% of applicants to the long begone program actually complete a pre-inspection, which means that 56% of applicants are actually not able to get past the first stage of the process, and they become ineligible from the get-go for program completion. Looking at the right-hand pie chart, which takes that 44% and is looking at just long begone participants who pass pre-inspection, 71% go on to actually complete the program, resulting in a program completion rate of 31%. And so what we notice is that after people are able to get past that first initial hurdle, many go on to finish the program. But it's important to be aware of this because with a completion rate of about 31%, there are lots of resources in the form of time and money that are being invested in participants who ultimately don't convert their lawns. So it's really important to understand what are the barriers to completion so that BOSCA can make its program not only more cost effective, but see more water savings.
As both Kaitlyn and Isaac noted, we have seen a significant participation spike. Because of this, we want to understand who's participating and who's not. To do this, we created a demographic spreadsheet using the 2014 American Community Survey data. and we defined our participant as anyone who applied to the program. So we have the historical long begone data set, and so whoever applied to this program, we're considering them a participant, as opposed to someone who completed the program. And the reason that we're making this distinction is because we believe that one, using our applicants rather than completed projects is going to give us a much bigger sample size to see trends. And secondly, we believe that if people are applying to the program, then they are being reached by various marketing and outreach opportunities. So first, we're going to start with the percentage of white population versus participation rate, and we see a positive trend in this. We believe that this is indicative of potentially higher incomes, better education, and a lower language and cultural barriers to applying. Next, we're going to talk about the percent of the Hispanic population versus the percentage of the Asian population. We see that both of these have negative trends, and we believe these are largely due to language barriers. As we mentioned earlier, Redwood City has 40% of their population that is Hispanic or Latino, but they do not offer any Spanish versions of their application or Spanish educational opportunities. Similarly, none of the agencies that we talk to offer any or Asian language application or educational opportunities, which we think it would be a cost-efficient and beneficial way to make these programs more accessible to these demographics. And then this is kind of our sensitivity analysis. As opposed to doing the applicants, we did the completion rates. And what we see in this is that we lose the downward trend. And so what we think this believes is that demographic factors such as language or cultural barriers are not stopping people from completing the project, but rather we're missing these people on the front end. They're never getting the information in the first place. Finally, we're going to turn to high school and college education rates. Both of these are positively correlated with participation, and we believe that this is for two reasons. One, better educated people are more likely to be cognizant and aware of the drought consequences and more likely to take steps to alleviate these issues. As well as, secondly, better educated people are less likely to be overwhelmed and intimidated by a burdensome application and completion process. Now we're going to look at a snapshot and more individualized demographic analysis of Redwood City. We were able to do this because Redwood City's data set gave us home addresses, which allowed us to split the participants up in zip codes, as well as find their home values. And we can see from this table that 80% of the participants in the Redwood City's Long Be Gone program are coming from the households with the highest median home value, the highest median household income, and the highest percentage of white population, which kind of goes along with our demographic analysis earlier. And the underperformer, 94063, which has 28% of the total household share of Redwood City, but only 11% of the Long Be Gone participants. And they have the highest percentage of the Hispanic population of these zip codes. Again, Redwood City does not offer any Spanish application or opportunities, and we believe that this is an area that they could make, an area where we can make things more accessible to this demographic group.
Moving on to water use trends, we wanted to make sure that there were observable water savings. So in order to do that, we looked at all 5 of the agencies for which we had data, and we looked at what the average annual water use for a participant in each agency. Obviously, we see Stanford as a huge outlier here, so we'll move on to a detail later, but what we have 3 different time periods here. So we have more than a year before the conversion, the year before the conversion, and after the conversion. The reason we implemented this middle ground, the year before, shown in orange, is because we wanted to be able to get a snapshot of directly before the conversion and then after to see what water savings are actually attributable to the conversion itself. Focusing on EMID, this is the one that has the lowest water savings. You'll see that the average participant reduced their water use by 12,000 gallons per year. That's around roughly a 17% decrease in water use. Hayward, on the other hand, reduced theirs by 20,000 gallons per year, which is 32%. For those interested in Stanford, they reduced theirs by 83,000 gallons per year. That's because they're using so much water beforehand. So it's a 37% reduction in water use. So not anywhere out of their normal realm. Moving on beyond these water saving trends, we also did cost effectiveness. In this case, EMID again scores very low in water savings, looking at, for the average participant, gallons saved per dollar spent in rebates. So EMID was very low, 6.16 gallons saved per year for each dollar spent. The reason that's so low, one is that obviously they saved relatively little water compared to other groups, but also because they spent a lot more on rebates. So their rebate amount was $4 per square foot, which when compared to, say, Redwood City or Alameda, Redwood City and Alameda spent only $1 per square foot on their rebates. Hayward is the best by this metric, 41 or 40 and a half roughly gallons saved per dollar spent. This is again because they had high water savings, but also because they had the lowest rebates, 75 cents per square foot. Additionally, you should note that because these are fixed costs and the rebate costs are fixed, these are scalable water savings. So depending on the literature you read, it could be 10 or 15 years that you expect these water savings. So you can scale all these water savings 10 to 15 times. For our second metric, we have gallons saved per square foot converted, trying to get rid of the money side of things. Still, EMID scores very low by this metric, again because of the low water savings. Stanford scores very high on the back of the fact that basically they had a lot of room to improve.
Sorry about that. So our next, so we also conducted interviews in order to paint a picture of the activity of the agencies, what they've experienced, what their successes and their failures have been, or what they identified, or what they believe to be their areas for improvement, and see how, and see what their opinion is about participation, about what their about marketing outreach strategies, and about how they believe that the application can be improved. So there are two main themes that emerged within the interviews, and so the first is about the need for a consolidated source of customer information. So this is a quote that I'm going to read for you really quickly. The agency said, "Some customers are interested in converting their landscapes, but they don't know where to begin. Occasionally, the finished landscapes end up being less aesthetically pleasing than they could have been due to a lack of participant education, and in extreme cases, applicants get overwhelmed and end up not completing the projects at all. An online resource that includes a list of landscapers specific to our area who specialize in water-efficient landscaping, design and installation, template landscape designs, abbreviated plant lists, and photos of completed projects would be useful." So this is something that came up several times, is that participants, especially participants who don't have any prior landscaping background, need a way to better understand how to design what their project should look like, and they don't believe that there is a good comprehensive source of information for participants. And so the next theme is actually very closely related to the previous theme. A lot of agencies had a lot to say about the importance of efficiency and the need for a more streamlined application. So this is another quote, and this agency said, "There are a lot of requirements in the program which make it more time consuming for the agency. So on one hand, that's difficult. On the other hand, it helps to maintain those water savings. So I wouldn't want to eliminate them, just maybe figure out a better way to streamline the application. Maybe submitting pictures ahead of time, maybe a more interactive application so the customer doesn't miss pieces along the way. It reduces the amount of back and forth we have with the customer." So again, this overlaps with the need for better customer resources, because not only do better customer resources help customers execute better projects, it also saves time on the part of the agency. This idea of back and forth is something that came up a couple of times, because if a customer doesn't know what they're doing or how to execute a project, then they will reach out to the agency for help, and that involves time and resources that agencies can't always spare. So creating a better source of information for applicants would also help the agency in terms of saving time.
So now that we've shared our results, it's important for us to share with you the limitations to our analysis. So there are a few major limitations. One is that there was a lack of distinction between indoor and outdoor water use. When we were given our data set, it would tell us how much water consumption was, but there was no way for us to know how much of this water is related to taking a shower as opposed to watering your lawn. So this makes it hard to tell the true savings of turf removal programs when we're not able to distinguish between indoor and outdoor water use. Second is time. Many of the conversions have taken place since 2015. Therefore, we need more time in order to really gauge the true water savings of these programs. And as we've been highlighting throughout this presentation, a lot of these completions have happened in 2015 in response to Governor Brown's mandate. And so we just feel like there needs to be more time in order to measure the savings. Third is participant level demographic information. We wanted to conduct a demographic analysis, but without participant level information, that was impossible. So we did have information for Redwood City, which is what allowed us to conduct or create the graphs that Connor shared with us, but we didn't have that for other agencies. And so with that information, we would be able to understand how other demographic factors influence participation, completion, etc. And finally, there's inconsistencies of data collection tools. This is across agencies, and this creates issues. For example, Palo Alto is one data set we received, but they didn't have completion dates for the project, and as a result, we were not able to conduct the analysis showing how much water was saved pre and post conversion. And so inclusion of this information is critical in order to evaluate the savings attributable to a program. And also the ratio of plants to permeable landscape is really important, and this is not standardized either. And without this, there is variability in water savings across plants and permeable landscape, and so it's important to know this information, again, to accurately calculate water savings attributable to the program. And now that I shared the limitations, we will go into the recommendations that we hope to share with Bosca.
So the first recommendation we're going to be sharing with y'all is definitely informed by the limitations that we faced in our own data analysis. So the first part of our recommendation, we're basically recommending a framework for future analysis. So some of the limitations that we faced, we thought could have been solved by standardized and consistent and standardized data collection process across all BOSCA agencies. This will basically allow for when they're evaluating their programs to see more generally what works and what doesn't for specific turf conversion programs. So some things that we thought would be useful to include in the framework is participant level demographic information. As of now, there is no kind of demographic information linked to specific participants. So that makes it a little bit harder to make connections between kind of like city level or region level demographics to specific things that we want to correlate it to. So participant level demographic information would help a lot, and we see this maybe being a question in the application about certain demographic characteristics. Also consistent time durations. As of right now, most BOSCA agencies do measure water consumption bi-monthly, but some still do it quarterly. So having it all be bi-monthly would help a lot in that analysis.